What if I told you a TV show predicted real-world political events, and now even its creator is scared? Not in a vague, oh, that's a coincidence kind of way. We're talking about a show that mapped out political scenarios, wrote them into scripts, filmed them, and then watched in disbelief as those exact scenarios started playing out in real life. And the man who made it all happen, he's not celebrating. He's disturbed. This is the story of The Boys, Season 5, and the moment fiction stopped feeling like fiction. Before we get into it, if you haven't seen The Boys yet, first of all, what are you doing? And second, don't worry. We'll keep spoilers to a minimum. But even if you've never watched a single episode, what we're about to break down matters. Because this isn't just about a TV show. It's about what that TV show is saying about the world we're actually living in. The Boys premiered on Amazon Prime Video back in 2019, and it hit like a lightning bolt. On the surface, it looks like a superhero show. But it's not. It's a savage, brutal, darkly comedic deconstruction of superhero mythology. In this world, superheroes, called supes, aren't noble. They're corporate assets. They're manufactured celebrities. They're tools of power dressed up in capes and good PR. And the most powerful of them all, Homelander, is the scariest villain on television. Not because he can shoot lasers from his eyes, though he can, but because he looks exactly like the kind of person a frightened, angry population would follow straight off a cliff. The show has never been subtle. That's kind of the point. Creator Eric Kripke, the same man who gave us Supernatural, has always described The Boys as political satire turned up to 11. It's a show that takes the ugliest parts of American culture, corporate greed, unchecked power, media manipulation, nationalism, fascism, and wraps them in spandex and superhero spectacle. It's designed to make you laugh and then immediately feel sick about the fact that you laughed. But here's where things get genuinely unsettling. When Kripke and his writer's room sat down to craft Season 5, the final season, they wrote scripts based on where they thought the political and cultural landscape might be heading. Not where it was, where they imagined it could go. Worst-case scenarios, exaggerated extrapolations, fiction, satire, things that couldn't possibly happen exactly like this in real life. And then real life happened. Kripke has spoken publicly about the experience of watching news cycles unfold and recognizing plot points from scripts that hadn't even aired yet. He described the feeling as genuinely alarming. Not exciting, not validating, alarming. In interviews, he's talked about the writer's room being disturbed by how closely reality was mirroring their darkest creative choices. There's a specific kind of horror in writing something as a warning and then watching it become a headline. He said, and this is key, that the show started to feel less like satire and more like a documentary. And when satire can't stay ahead of reality, that's when you know something has gone seriously wrong in the real world. Let's pause on that for a second, because it's important. Satire works by exaggeration. You take something real, you inflate it, you push it past the point of plausibility, and in that gap between reality and absurdity, you expose the truth. Jonathan Swift writing about eating babies to solve poverty. Stanley Kubrick making Dr. Strangelove about nuclear annihilation. The whole genre depends on a gap. A safe distance. A moment where the audience can laugh and think, well, it's not that bad. The Boys has always operated in that gap. But according to Kripke himself, that gap is closing. And in some cases, it's already closed. Now, let's talk about Homelander. Because if you want to understand why this show has become so culturally explosive, you have to understand him. Played with terrifying precision by Anthony Starr, Homelander is, on the surface, America's greatest hero. He's got the square jaw, the flowing hair, the stars and stripes suit. He gives speeches that make people weep with patriotic pride. He's the perfect symbol of American greatness, power, and virtue. Underneath that, he is a deeply traumatized, narcissistic, emotionally stunted man-child who craves adoration the way the rest of us crave oxygen. He cannot tolerate criticism. He cannot tolerate weakness in himself or others. He is driven entirely by ego, fear, and a desperate need for the crowd to love him. And when the crowd doesn't love him, he doesn't reflect. He doesn't grow. He doubles down. He finds someone to blame. He finds an enemy. And his followers, his very real, very passionate followers, cheer louder. Sound familiar? The Boys is careful never to draw a single direct line to any one real-world political figure. That's smart writing. That's also what makes it more potent, not less. Because Homelander isn't a caricature of one person. He's a synthesis of a type. A political archetype that has appeared throughout history, in different countries, in different eras, wearing different flags. The charismatic strongman who sells himself as salvation. The leader whose appeal is rooted not in policy or competence, but in the emotional need of a population that feels left behind, looked down on, and ready to be told that their anger is righteous and their enemies deserve what's coming. That's not a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. It's a human thing. And history is absolutely littered with the wreckage it leaves behind. What The Boys does, brilliantly and brutally, is show you how it works. Not just the leader, but the system around him. The corporate structures that profit from his rise. The media apparatus that amplifies his message. The true believers who would rather follow him off a cliff than admit they were manipulated. And the ordinary people, the Billy Butchers of the world, who see it clearly but don't have clean hands themselves. It's not a flattering portrait of anyone. That's what good political satire looks like. Now, here's the thing. Not everyone appreciated that lack of flattery. Season 4 landed in 2024 and was immediately hit with a wave of controversy that split the fan base down the middle. Review scores were unusually polarized. Social media was on fire. Some fans felt the show had become too overtly political, too heavy-handed, too obvious, too willing to sacrifice character and story in favor of making a point. Others felt the show was doing exactly what it needed to do, that the real world had become that extreme, and looking away would be the bigger artistic failure. The review bombing was real. The discourse was ugly. And in a deeply ironic twist, the arguments happening online about The Boys started to look a lot like the arguments The Boys was depicting on screen. Two sides, increasingly unable to hear each other, increasingly convinced the other side was not just wrong but dangerous. Kripke addressed the backlash directly. He didn't back down, but he also acknowledged the criticism with more nuance than you might expect. He talked about the difficulty of writing political satire in a moment when political reality is itself so extreme that satire struggles to keep up. He talked about the responsibility that comes with a platform as large as The Boys now occupies. And he pushed back against the idea that the show should soften its edges to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. Here's the thing about political satire. It's not supposed to make you comfortable. The moment it stops making you uncomfortable, it stopped doing its job. But the backlash also raised a legitimate question, one worth sitting with. Is there a version of political satire that becomes so committed to its message that it starts to alienate the audience it most needs to reach? If the people who most need to hear what The Boys is saying have already written it off as propaganda, does the show still work? Can it still change minds if it's only being watched by people who already agree? These are hard questions. The Boys doesn't necessarily answer them, but asks them, which is more than most entertainment is willing to do. And now, Season 5, the final chapter, the end of the story that started with a simple, devastating question. What if superheroes were real? And what if they were the worst people imaginable? From everything that has been revealed, and we'll stay away from specific spoilers here, Season 5 is going to be the most intense, the most politically charged, and the most emotionally devastating chapter yet. Kripke has described it as a conclusion that he hopes will feel earned. Not comfortable, earned. Homelander's arc, by all accounts, is heading somewhere even darker than where we left him. And given where we left him, consolidating power, surrounded by true believers, facing virtually no institutional check on his behavior, that is genuinely frightening to contemplate. The show seems to be building toward a reckoning, not just for the characters, but for the audience. What does it mean to let someone like Homelander rise? What are the real-world conditions that make it possible? What are the things we told ourselves along the way that allowed it to happen? And is the ending we think we want? The hero defeats the monster, justice is served, the system corrects itself. Actually the ending we're going to get? Or is the show going to do what it's always done and show us the uglier truth? Because here's what The Boys has always understood, and what its best critics have always recognized. The most dangerous villains aren't the ones who hide who they are. They're the ones who show you exactly who they are, and half the world applauds anyway. Kripke didn't set out to make a prophecy. He set out to make a mirror. A big, ugly, unflinching mirror that reflects something real about power and fear and the stories we tell ourselves to justify following the wrong people for the wrong reasons. The fact that the mirror keeps showing us our actual reflection, that's not the show's fault. That's on us. Season 5 of The Boys is coming. And whether you love the show, hate it, or have complicated feelings that change every episode, it's going to be impossible to ignore. It's going to be loud and violent and provocative and occasionally deeply uncomfortable. And when it's over, when Homelander's story reaches its conclusion and the credits roll for the last time, we're all going to be left with a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Is The Boys just entertainment? Or is it a warning? And if it's a warning, are we listening in time?